Welcome to our July quarterly planners meetings, and I see folks are introducing themselves in the chat. Fantastic. For those just popping in, please just put your name and your jurisdiction. And this is being recorded for planners who are not able to attend today. So this will be available on our YouTube page after today's meeting. And with that, Lisa and Kate, do you guys want to jump into legislative updates?
Sure thing.
Awesome.
We are queuing it up right now. Turn your mic off. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Many of you, or all of you actually, should have received a copy via email from Kate. I'm Lisa Hoerger. This is Kate Durant. We're the legislative and regulatory team. And Kate sent you all an email probably a week and a half ago with the draft regulations. Emphasize the word draft. So we are putting this out to you for the first time. If there's anyone on the call that did not receive the draft, please put that in the chat and we will make sure that you get it along with your email address. We may not have all of your email addresses in our list, so we'd be happy to add you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and Kate and I plan to just kind of do a run through of the highlights of the draft that you received. And we are happy to take questions during our time. Just raise your hand and we'll be happy to answer those. We'll also be taking questions afterwards. We know you probably have lots of questions. We also are eager to hear of any suggestions that you all have or concerns, and we'll be taking those down. That's kind of one of the purposes of today's meeting with you all. We plan to meet with you all again in a couple of weeks as we continue to refine and revise the draft that you have in your inboxes now. We're working with our commission members, taking their questions and concerns. We've been working with them probably over the past, I guess, the fall and the winter. And then Kate and I have been drafting this. So as you can see, it takes a little time, but we don't want to rush it. We want to make sure that what we put together is something that is implementable on the ground. So with that, I guess, Kate, if you want to advance the slide.
Is that not advancing?
No.
Cool.
Technical difficulty. Here we go. It advanced. So going back 2 years, in 2024, the legislature adopted a bill that required, for the first time, the commission to have new programmatic requirements for local governments. And I'm going to run through that list of things first, and then we're going to get into the part of the legislation that has specifically to do, like the nitty-gritty, the equity and the climate resiliency. So one of the things that the legislation expressly requires local government programs to do with regard to these updated regulations and requirements is to assess and map public access points. Now, before everybody gets nervous about that, I just want to say that many of the things that I'm about to rattle off to you all are things that the Critical Area Commission staff are doing for you. So these are things that either this data already exists and can be provided to you, or you have access to it right now, or they are mapping layers that our commission staff is working on. So assessing and mapping public access points in your counties and towns is something that isn't out there completely yet, but we're working on it. The next thing is the legislation required local governments to identify vulnerable areas, and that is something that is already out in public space that folks can access now. And then it also requires that local programs incorporate mitigation and adaptation measures. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So when there is an area on a site plan that shows an inundation area or a wetland migration area, how to mitigate and adapt to those things, at the same time allowing development to move forward in those areas. The legislation also requires that strategies be identified to enhance nature-based features, another thing we're working on for you all. But if you all are already ahead of us and you want to tell us things that you're doing in your local jurisdictions, please let us know. Either email Kate or myself or drop it in the chat, or let us, we'll talk about it in a little bit. The other thing that the legislation requires, and this is also of the Critical Area Commission, when our commission has to review and approve growth allocation. So it's on us too, is that when we identify an underserved or overburdened community, that we ensure that there's an equitable distribution of environmental burdens and benefits. And those are things that we're going to talk about and provide you all with in guidance. And Charlotte and her
You froze.
Lisa, yeah, it looks like you guys froze at saying Charlotte and her team.
team are working
Wow.
on the guidance, and she'll be talking about some of that in a little bit.
Can you hear? Okay,
That's
we
right.
can hear you now. We heard Charlotte and her team. And now you guys are frozen again.
Can you hear me?
Oh no. Yes.
Okay. Charlotte and her team are working. We're not moving.
We're going to turn off our camera. We're here, we swear, but that's probably taking up.
That sounds good. Save the bandwidth.
Okay. Issues and how to, like, ideas about how, if there is a project that has identified or it has been identified that there is an overburdened or underserved community, how to manage these things. And then the final thing I think on here is to ensure equitable participation. So the draft that you have now has a little bit about public notice, but we're already working on refining that to include some other elements of public notice. But our challenge is making sure that we're not duplicating your efforts already at the local level when you have a project that's going through, say, your planning commission or your county council or county commissioners. So we're trying to make sure that we do not do that. So that's kind of the general overview of the, pardon me, the program requirements. Okay, so one of the other things that is in your current draft is the added fee in lieu reporting. So technically, everyone's required to report to commission staff every April 1st their fee in lieu buffer mitigation, forest, and then if you collect monies for stormwater management. It's never really been in COMAR, but it's going in COMAR, and Chapter 10 that's noted on the slide is the chapter in COMAR where it talks about all the things that local programs have to have in them, which somewhat derived from the statute and is also things like mapping and things that you all do. So it's not anything new that you're not already doing. We're just putting it in there, and that's something that we do once a year. We're also, I think this is on Charlotte again too. Staff can correct me if I'm wrong. Her and her team are working on some guidance to assist with reporting so it's easy and it doesn't take a lot of your time. Okay, so moving on to some of the new regulations. So as I said in the beginning, the legislation focuses on climate resiliency and equity. And these are two new goals of the Critical Area Commission. We already had 3 goals that have been in existence since 1984, and now we have 2 more. So what we're doing in this draft is we are trying to focus on types of projects that we would apply climate resiliency regulations to and equity regulations to. So in that regard, yes, we have zeroed in on I'm going to call, I don't know if it's really a subset, but it's a set of project applications that these regulations would apply to. Before I rattle them all off, what I will say is these are not going to apply to every single building permit that you all review. They are not going to apply to every single building permit. And I say that twice, so forgive me, but I know when we've been working on these regulations over the past couple months, we get in a discussion about this and we start to go down a rabbit hole and realize we're not applying it to a single family residential. So this is what we're going to apply them to. So major subdivisions, and we're going to talk about the difficulty with that in a minute as far as how to figure it out. But well, I guess, yeah, like we are relying on, for major subdivisions, one of the things we're aware of that everybody's code is a little bit different with regard to how you define that. And the state has a definition for major subdivisions. And this goes back to the days of the tier mapping. For those of you that were around when the Department of Planning did their tier mapping bill and I guess subsequent regulations, and they defined what constituted a major subdivision. So for now, we are planning to use that definition of major subdivision, which does appear in your draft, but you may have a different page than I do, so I'm not going to give you a page. But it's in the front part of your draft where the definitions appear. And basically, it comes out of the land use article, and that's where we're getting that from. The next thing is major site plans. This one is going to be a little bit more difficult to navigate because we know, again, like subdivisions, each jurisdiction varies somewhat with regard to what's considered a major site plan. So some of you might have it in there as far as like the type of use or, you know, how big it's going to be, or does it have to go through the Planning Commission approval or just go through staff? So we're working on how to define that. And then obviously growth allocations, and the reason that growth allocations are on this list is because it's required in the statute. So they are going to be required to apply the resiliency and the equity regulations. Local government projects. So if you all have, like, I don't know, a water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, a park, school, anything that's on local government lands would have to run the climate resiliency and the equity screens. And then finally, state agencies have to do the same thing. And generally, state agencies have been applying climate resiliency regulations to their projects since 2014, because we updated our regulations 12 years ago, I guess it's been now, to have state agencies do this. They were kind of like the tests. So we've learned a lot over the years from applying certain things to their projects, even though sometimes they're going to vary as far as, like, they don't do major subdivisions, obviously, or site plan, but they are also going to be required. So these 5 items, and the one doesn't really apply to you all, the state agency, those are what we're focusing on. So if you want to go to the next one. All right, so there are some new definitions that you'll see in the packet. The definition of adjacency. So this actually was something that came out of this past legislative session. And because we're doing these regulations, we decided to add it into this draft proposal. And this has to do with when you have a growth allocation and you're trying to determine whether the new proposed limited development area or intensely developed area is adjacent to one of those areas. And it's been a question. We were trying to define it with another word in the statute, and at the end of the day, we all came back to the idea that we are going to just define adjacency. So that is in your packet, and it's not part of the bill from 2024, but it's from the one this past session. And so we're just putting it in there now. Climate resiliency, that's a new one for everybody. So that's we're going to add that into your programs. Equity, inundation area is new for everybody. So we're going to be adding that one.
Leah says, I head up. I think you froze again. Yep, you definitely froze. Lisa, are you with us?
Here, can you guys hear me through this microphone?
Yes. Yep, definitely.
Okay.
Perfect. So I don't know where I left off, but wetland migration areas is the last definition that you'll see in the packet that you have.
Mhm.
And all of these definitions are also going to be dropped into the model ordinance that you all use when you're updating your programs. And for those of you that just did it and they're not in your programs, that's okay. They will still apply, and we'll catch up with you around next time around.
Yeah.
So we've had some questions already from some of our commission members. And that is, and for those of you that have read through this part of the regulations that have to do with resiliency and identifying inundation areas, what do we do if we have an applicant either with a major, minor, local government project or growth allocation that gets a hit for an inundation area on their allotted parcel? So many of you are very familiar with what you see on the screen, because we do this with a lot of environmental type of laws and regulations, and things aren't always neatly tied up in a bow, as you know, by numbers necessarily. It's more qualitative type things rather than quantitative, but the goals of these regulations, like they are when we do anything else, think about the buffer, and you all are very familiar with that, is to first avoid impacts to that area. And if that's not possible for whatever reason, then we're going to try and minimize those impacts and then finally mitigate. So I know that you all are familiar with that, and that's kind of how this is coming about. The other thing I want to keep stressing and emphasizing is we are going to be providing, in addition to what you have here, there's going to be guidance. So we're not going to leave you out on a limb. We're going to give you as much support and guidance as we possibly can, because we want to make this as easy as it is to identify a buffer. You guys have been doing this stuff for 40 some years, or at least the law's been in place for 40 some years, and you all come along and you're very familiar with an application shows the buffer and then how to treat that buffer and then how to process that application. So it's the same concept. So I think at this point, we're going to show you some diagrams that kind of generally describe where we're going with this and the types of tools we're going to use to identify inundation areas. So I'm going to let Kate take over, and hopefully she won't freeze. So take it away, Kate.
All right, here's hoping that we don't freeze. So pretend for a moment that this is a site plan, and it's it's a major site plan, we'll say, and this is roughly where your 100-foot buffer line would show up, right? So this is what you guys are used to seeing. Somebody submits a plan, they have their 100-foot buffer delineated, and then they're showing their development outside of the 100-foot buffer. Yes? Sorry, I thought I heard someone say something.
You're good.
Okay, so what we're proposing for the inundation area is that we use the Maryland Commission on Climate Change's data tables that will be updated every 5 years. So we're kind of in between cycles at the moment, but we are also looking at determining the how do we phrase it? When you look at the definition for inundation area, it talks about using the sea level rise probability that is unlikely to exceed, which is the 83rd percentile for the, I believe it's the design life of the project. So if you think your project is going, you want it to last until 2070, that means that you have to look at 2.3 feet of probable sea level rise. That is a true elevation. So that would be an elevation based on where current like mean high water is, and then you would basically add the 2.3 feet and have that mapped sort of as with the topography of the site. So you, instead of just having your 100-foot buffer line shown in red, we would also we could see this inundation area based off of those, it's 2.3 feet of sea level rise for the design life of the project. And you can see that the inundation area will come a little bit into the buffer, but not all the way. But in certain areas, it may exceed the buffer. And as Lisa mentioned, the goal will be to avoid any development in the inundation area to the maximum extent that you can. And then if you can't avoid development in that area, minimizing the impacts and providing mitigation. One thing that we've had questions about is whether or not there may be a way to allow for possibly some development within the 100-foot buffer if the developer agrees to remain outside of the inundation area. I think that's something that we can discuss. I think our goal overall is if the site is large enough, and we're hoping that with major subdivisions and major site plans and growth allocations, that the property is large enough that there is room to stay outside of both the 100-foot buffer and the inundation area. But if that is not completely feasible, I think that there is room to discuss the possibility of maybe allowing a little bit of development in the buffer, especially if it's already been cleared or is not fully vegetated. So that's the inundation area. And then this is an example of what it could look like on an actual plan. So the line that's outlined in orange shows sort of the existing bulkhead area. And then the light blue areas show where the expected sea level rise will be. So you can see that it's definitely going to exceed the bulkhead, and in certain areas, may impact some existing structures that are already there. And that would allow the local jurisdiction to assume, let's let's move something if we can and make sure that it's outside of that inundation area, or if we were planning on building a new building in that area, is there a possibility that we can move it outside of that area or elevate it so that it is not impacted during over its lifespan? And then the last thing that will be new for plans is our habitat protection areas. So currently our habitat protection areas are the buffer, non-tidal wetlands, threatened and endangered species, plant and wildlife habitats, and then anadromous fish propagation waters. We are proposing a new habitat protection area of wetland migration areas. And when you look at the draft that you were provided, there is some information about wetland migration areas as a habitat protection area. Again, for right now, we are proposing that it only applies in these certain situations. So wetland migration areas would not be a habitat protection area for all situations. It would only apply in the major subdivisions, major site plans, growth allocations, and local jurisdiction projects. And there's a mapper, which I do not have a picture of. But again, going back to our little pretend drawing, the green area is supposed to indicate the wetland migration area. So again, as with other HPAs, the goal is to avoid disturbing the HPA, and if you cannot avoid it, minimizing and then providing mitigation. There is a mapping tool that is available that shows wetland migration areas that we would encourage folks to use. We are also outlining a project that for this, where you can go out and you can go out and sort of justify the location of the wetland migration area, or try to determine if it is as extensive as it claims to be on the mapper.
Yes, so Claudia and Jamile, and I'm not sure who else was on that crew. Maybe Katie, I'm not sure. We've had some folks going out, meeting with, I think, the state soil scientist and folks from Soil Conservation District. I know definitely Dorchester County and possibly some of the other lower shore counties, and trying to possibly put together some guidance on that as well. We're finding out some really interesting things. So that's another possibility. As Kate said, it's just like FIDS, if somebody wants to dispute the map, they can go see if they can disprove what the mapping is saying. So same concept as nothing new. It would just be a different resource.
Thank you, Lisa.
Sure.
So I'm going to stop here for a second. Does anybody have any questions about the concepts of the inundation area or the wetland migration area and how we're hoping it will apply based on the regulations we wrote? Stephanie.
Yeah, when you're talking about the design life of a project, how is that determined?
So this is something that comes up with state projects. When they submit, they have to determine how long they expect their project to be in existence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of it's determined by if it's like a major subdivision or something like that, they assume a certain amount of time.
Is that, I guess, is there guidance as to what the project might be, as to how much, obviously, if we get a site plan or subdivision in and we have to assess this and we have to say, no, sorry, you're not addressing the right years in which that project will be around, is there a tool that we can go to and say, no, you need to look further out because it might, obviously plan for a longer period of time, or the opposite. So how do we, I guess, address that?
I think a little bit of it is common sense. If it's a subdivision and they're building housing, I think you have to assume that the design life should probably be at least 30 years, which is the average mortgage, if not 50 or longer.
Is
So
that
that would-
something that can be addressed? Because I know we're going to get the question, and
We can put it, yeah, we'll take
something
care
is,
of it.
there's going to be concerns, at least from a planning perspective and review perspective, of developers trying to push the limits of that, and the county or towns having to say, no, sorry, but we need teeth to justify it. I think in some way, whether it's a tool or something that's already developed out there, or guidance, that would be fine too, I think.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. And Eric, I think you may have had a response as well.
Yep. No, I was just going to second that we can absolutely put some guidance out there on this one, Stephanie. I appreciate the comment. And I would also say that I think that guidance will include an absolute limit on design life as well. One might argue that a subdivision, because you're creating new lots, is forever. But obviously we can't extend sea level rise considerations to forever. So I think there will be a hard cap at some point on design life, because we become less and less certain about where the water may end up as we get farther out. So no one will be beholden to 300 years of sea level rise. But definitely in the shorter term, understand that some guidance parsing out some of these different uses could be useful.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Eric.
Right. Sarah?
Yes, thank you. So this may be getting a bit into the equity piece, but on that front, right, if you have a housing development going in, I guess I would just say that the caution, if it's a lower income or a affordable units, that we would want to make sure that it's a longer frame, so that we're not having a loss there. Is that making sense?
So you're saying if it's an affordable housing, it should have a longer design life?
Yes.
To ensure that if they are, to ensure that they can stay out of that inundation area, so that the housing itself will ideally exist for a longer period of time.
Right. So that a lot of times the low income housing is built either unfilled wetlands or in these areas that something else can't be built on. And then that cost is passed off to the future residents of the site. And so that's a concern working in coastal communities, I think.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. That's good to know.
I saw a question in the chat, Catherine from Cecil County. Where is the mapping tool? Or I assume you're talking about the climate.
For the wetland migration areas.
Yeah.
That would be, we've been using the Coastal Atlas. They have, Lisa's looking it up. I think she's going to try to put it in the chat, but there's Maryland Coastal Atlas, which has a layer in there for wetland migration areas, and it's based on models. I want to say it's the SLAM model, but I could be wrong. But it gives a good idea of, at least kind of like our FIDS layers that we use for screening. It gives a rough idea of where the locations will be. Yeah, got it. Okay.
Did that answer your question, Catherine? Yes, thank you. Okay, got it. And Susan, yes.
Yes, it is the same model.
Thank you, Susan. In
There's
the
so many
chat.
models in my life right now.
Lots of models.
Lots of models.
Did I miss anybody? There's lots going on in the chat. If some other staff can help monitor the chat, I don't want to miss anybody. Otherwise, you can raise your hand.
Everybody who just put their emails in the chat right now, I just sent an email with our updated, with the email that Kate and Lisa sent out the other week, along with the draft regulations and that summary sheet too that I just added to the chat. So if you guys are having trouble, just oh, Kate, you guys, I'm getting back by the. Actually, I'm just gonna go ahead and Okay, great. I'll unmute you, Kate, after I chat. Okay, so all right, yeah. Anybody, if you have, you did not get our the email from Kate and Lisa the other week that has the draft regulations that we're all chatting about here, go ahead and throw your email in the chat. I will ensure that you get that as well as that summary sheet, and we will also ensure that you are included in our contacts list if you weren't already. So yeah, with that, Kate, I'm going to unmute you. Sorry, there's some feedback. I think when we're talking, it's coming through on your direction. So I will unmute you now.
Better?
Is that better?
Better.
Yay. Okay. If we're going to start moving forward, but we can always come. Oh, go ahead, Charlotte. Did you have something?
I was just going to say, I think what happens is when a person asks a question or jumps in, if you're not muted, we're getting like an echoing feedback from that.
Okay, I will try to be on top of my microphone so when people ask questions, I can turn mine off.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry, guys. We're going to move forward, but if you still have a question about anything we said so far, please still jump in. So I guess we'll go to the next one, Kate.
Yep. So on to the next slide. I just wanted to briefly mention stormwater management, that we are making some changes, especially again, thinking back to this is only going to apply for right now to locations and local projects. So the one thing we're looking at is that we want to locate stormwater management outside areas that are vulnerable to climate. Outside of those areas, outside of the inundation area, outside of habitat protection areas, including the wetland migration area. We know that sometimes that is not possible, and we understand that, but if it's unavoidable, if you have to put stormwater management, your best management practices in areas that are vulnerable, so they have to wind up in the inundation area or the wetland migration area, we want to ensure that they are containing nutrients while they are inundated, since that is one of the purposes of the stormwater management. We also want to make sure that they continue to function after they've been flooded, whether it's from a storm event or it's from coastal flooding coming in. And we want to ensure that the vegetation and the groundwater separation and the outfalls, not outlaws. That's how I feel about stormwater management. Will continue to function and maintain their viability in the face of climate resiliency. Certain types of BMPs require vegetation to be an active part of the process, and certain other BMPs require a certain amount of separation between the bottom of the stormwater management BMP and the top of groundwater. And if there's not enough space separating there, the stormwater management BMP is not able to function to the best of its ability. And we do know that with climate change, as sea level is rising, groundwater is also rising, especially along the coastal areas, because it's kind of all working together and pushing each other up. So it's just something to keep in mind. with that, I'm going to briefly talk about what we're looking at for our equity regulations, and then there will be more time for questions at the end. For our equity regulations, the main driver is that we need to ensure that burdens and benefits are equitably distributed. So that means that ideally we're in a situation where if a project is going to have an impact on a community that has been overburdened or underserved, that community is included in some of the decision-making process. We've talked in the past about sometimes if it is a new housing development, or if there's something else, but the community is being impacted, there's a chance that they're going to lose some public access to water, or they've never really had public access to water. Maybe part of a new subdivision could be creating some public access, which would provide some benefits for those communities that have suffered impacts over the years. In order to address our equity regulations, we are proposing to use the MD EnviroScreen tool. So it has two parts to it. It's if you just Google MD EnviroScreen, it'll pop right up. These are just some screenshots that I took to sort of show the two sides of it. So this first slide that you're seeing is for, I know I've lost my, is for overburdened and underserved communities. And you can see that this is done by census tract. The blue areas are overburdened and underserved. If they are green, they're only overburdened. If they are purple, they are only underserved. Asian color, they are not defined as overburdened or underserved. So you can see that there are big sections of the state of Maryland that are considered overburdened and or underserved, especially within the critical area. And so one of the things that we put in the regulations, I'm going to swipe your rigs for a second. Sorry.
No worries.
Is that for these major subdivisions, major site plans, growth allocations, local projects, you have to do a determination to figure out if there are any of these communities in the vicinity of the project. And then Charlotte will talk a little bit more about this too in terms of the guidance. But our goal is that if you do get a hit for overburdened or underserved, or further along the next slide, I'll show you the environmental justice slide, that extra steps are taken to ensure that those communities
Okay, I think you're frozen again. We lost you after extra
involved
steps.
in the process. And also extra steps are taken to ensure that those communities are getting
Yes, sorry, we lost you after you said extra steps. First time.
okay.
Sorry.
Just that there are extra, it's okay. Thank you for letting me know that there are extra steps to take to ensure that those adjacent or nearby communities are getting the public notice. Historically, we are required to provide public notice in the newspaper. We recently expanded our regulations to also allow for additional types of public notice. But newspaper is still required under Maryland state law. But we also want jurisdictions to think, a little bit outside of the box and think about the best ways to get in touch with their constituents, whether that's digitally or otherwise. So that's where a lot of the equity considerations are coming into play. We also are hoping that when it comes time to determine mitigation for projects that have an equity component, that the communities that are being impacted or will be impacted are at least encouraged to participate in discussions about what type of mitigation may benefit the community, because it may not be, if the mitigation is required at 3-to-1 and 1-to-1 is planted in trees, the community may not need additional trees. They may need access to water, to public lands. They may need other, I can't think of any other good examples at the moment, but that's something to keep in mind as well. The other side of the MD and virus screen EJ score is the side that is greens and browns and shows the actual score for the census tracts. And all right, Charlotte's going to talk a little bit more about public access in her presentation, so you'll get some more information about that. But when it comes to the EJ score, that's also another component of determining whether the communities have been impacted. So this was just sort of to let you see what the tool looks like, and you can dig down a little bit deeper. But do remember, it is by census tract, so they are not always, they don't always make sense. It's kind of like we always have to remember environmental issues don't necessarily stop at the county line. They go where they're going to go. And then the very last thing that we are updating in the regulations are updates to growth allocation and density requirements. So now it clearly states in the statute, and we are also putting it in the regulations, that new IDA and LDA for growth allocation should be located outside areas vulnerable to climate change. That includes inundation area and wetland migration areas. It's now required to assess the environmental impacts on overburden and underserved communities when looking at the growth allocation. And the new one is, in the past, you couldn't count private wetlands towards your overall lot size, but the statute was updated so that private wetlands can now be counted towards your overall lot size, but only if you are using the transfer of development rights and you are sending those development rights to a receiving area. So if you have, let's say, 25 acres, but you have 15 acres of private wetlands, in the past with 25 acres, you would have one development right. But if you now can use your 15 acres of private wetlands, that would bring you up to 40 acres in the RCA. You could get 2 development rights, but those development rights would have to be sent, or at least the extra, I think, has to be sent. So that extra development right can be sent to a receiving area. And Eric, please. please
Oh, good.
correct me
I think, okay, you broke up a
or
little.
clarify.
Yeah, no, you're all good. And you broke up there a little bit at the end. Yep. So there are a couple of different ideas on this slide. They're all unified under the idea of growth allocation and density. But I want to clarify something on number one, and that is that in this is a statutory requirement now. It's just being transferred over to regulation, but there is in the statute, and we'll carry this forward as well, an unless in that, just like we've been talking about for the last hour. That's what we try first. We try locating the growth allocation outside the inundation areas and things like that where we can. But understanding that we can't always do that, especially in our counties where we have less topography, where those inundation areas are going to be very large, Dorchester, Somerset, Wycomico, and Worcester in particular. There is an unless in the statute that says if you are able to incorporate measures to reduce risk when you build in there, you can build in there. So I wanted to make sure that we highlight that there is sort of an outlet for this, because we recognize that that is going to land very differently in a county that has topography and is not faced with sea level rise dramatically changing things versus a county, say on the lower shore or certain areas, even in like Anne Arundel, where you have much flatter ground and these areas are going to be much larger. So that is built into the statute, even though it's not reflected on this slide, and it will be reflected in the regulations as well. A question that has come up in the past on number 3, what is this about transfer of development rights? Is this our own county program? Is this something that we are now required to do through critical areas? It is neither of those things. We got the ability to approve transfer of development rights programs specific to the critical area in your jurisdiction if you want one. So that is an optional program that is newly authorized by the legislature, and happy to work with any jurisdiction that would like to set one up. I think the thinking is that, again, it could provide another alternative for development to avoid inundation areas and wetland migration areas if they can sell those rights. We also know that TDR programs are very complex, and sometimes they work very well and sometimes they really struggle. So it's not a requirement. It's not a be all and end all, but it is another option for your jurisdiction if you wanted to pursue setting something up to help relieve some of these low-lying properties.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any more questions?
Sounds like we're not seeing or hearing anything on our end. Are you all still getting us? Because it's quiet.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay. We really appreciate your all's time. I mean, it's a lot. We're going to have more conversations with you all. So this is just the first go round. And as we put in a little bit more context for public notice and things like that, we will send those along to you. Thank you all for putting in your emails so we can capture those of you who weren't in our original blast email that Kate sent out the other week. We will make sure you're there. And again, you have our information in that email that Katie sent out while we were speaking. So if you guys want us to come talk to you about your specific jurisdiction, or, you know, we're happy to come see you. We're happy to chat over the phone, email, whatever works best for you. We are all ears. So please remember that. And we will keep you updated as far as when we're going to have another one of these, probably outside of a quarterly planners meeting, because we don't want to wait until October. And I know that Michael on our staff has some other things that he wants to do at the quarterly meeting in October. So we will keep you updated. Charlotte just put in the, I'm
when
sorry,
will the
Grace, I
regulations-
can't see.
When will the regulations
Yes.
go into effect? Okay, so we're still in the drafting process. We will definitely share. The short answer is it's going to be a little bit of time.
It probably won't be before the end of the year.
Yeah,
So probably early next year is my
At the
best guess.
at the earliest, it'll be early next year. Because the commission themselves have to vote on it, and then there's just a process that has timelines that we don't have control over.
Yeah.
So
And one thing I just saw in the chat, Sharktown, if you could also let us know who we're communicating with specifically, that would be great. And you're welcome, Grace. Thanks for the question. Okay, Katie, we'll give it back to you.
All right, fabulous. Okay, Sharpton, I do see your email. I am going to send that in just a moment. Okay, so moving right along. Yeah, Charlotte, you got it. Excellent. Okay, wonderful. All right, great. So moving right along. Thank you, Lisa and Kate. They are our regulations team for sharing the legislative updates and regulatory changes and coming updates. Now we're going to move on to our final presentation, Charlotte, with our education team. So go on ahead, Charlotte.
Great. Thank you, Katie. And thank you all for being here today. I know, like Lisa and Kate said, this is a lot of new kind of information, a lot of new changes. And so just to reiterate, like, please reach out if you have questions about any of it. We are definitely happy to talk to you specifically about your jurisdiction and questions that might be specific to you. So just to kind of try and differentiate what I'm going to be talking about versus what Lisa and Kate just covered. Last October, the commission passed a policy. So this is their participation, access, and community outcomes policy. That policy applies to the commission's actions. So it is applying to only those things that come to the commission. So that would be kind of a first differentiation that I would ask you all to kind of keep in your heads as I'm going through this. So this is applying to commission level projects that you as a local jurisdiction may be bringing in. It is also applying to program changes, including growth allocations. So that policy was approved by the commission in October of last year. And since then, I have been working on a guidance document basically to help local jurisdictions and state agencies, because it's also applying to state projects that come to the commission, to help you all follow the policy and meet the new kind of requirements that are laid out in that policy. And so, again, unlike the regulations that Lisa and Kate just talked about, this policy is in effect now because it was approved in October. We've kind of been slow rolling some of the requirements as I've been working on this guidance, because we didn't want to bombard you all with like a bunch of new stuff without helping you provide that new information that we're asking for and meeting the new requirements. So once this guidance is kind of finalized, then we're probably going to start asking for the additional information that the policy requires for projects and program changes that come to the commission. So again, just reiterating this, this policy is only applying to items that come before the commission. So this is going to include program changes, which were not covered under the regulations that Lisa and Kate talked about for the most part. And this is also a policy that addresses concerns related to equity. So this is our public access and community outcomes, or sorry, participation access and community outcomes policy. So we're looking at 4 kind of main goals of that policy, kind of focus areas, which I'm going to go over later in more detail. And I will say that once the regulations that Lisa and Kate just talked about, the ones pertaining to equity, once those are officially adopted, we are likely going to come back and update this policy, or sorry, this guidance document to help you in meeting those new regulations as well. So this guidance document, which is meant to accompany the Commission's participation, access, and community outcomes policy, is going to be kind of a living document as the regulations get adopted, and also as we work to implement the requirements in the policy and then later the regulations, because I think that we're probably going to figure out pretty quickly what works and what doesn't work. And so there likely will be updates to this guidance and kind of how we are implementing some of the requirements in the policy and then later in the regulations. So again, this guidance document is meant as an accompaniment to the Commission's participation, access, and community outcomes policy. And like I previously said, there's kind of 4 main focus areas of that policy that this guidance document is meant to kind of like walk you through as the applicant coming to the Commission. How am I addressing these 4 kind of main focus areas? So I'm going to go over them all pretty quickly and then go into a little bit more detail about each one. So the first main focus area is improving public engagement. So again, this is pertaining to projects and program changes that come to the Commission. Those who have taken the AICP exam will probably recognize that image. When we talk about public participation, you know, we're really striving to get to the top of that ladder. So we're looking at true partnerships with our citizens and the communities that might be affected by a project or a program change. So the specific like requirements in the policy that pertain to public engagement are gonna, you know, it's our first step towards getting there. And again, I'm going to talk in more detail about what that means for you all in a minute. The next main focus area is measuring the impact of the proposed project or program change, specifically on environmental justice communities, overburdened communities, or underserved communities. I know that some of these kind of like, I understand that in talking about this from this kind of general overview, it seems a little bit nebulous. Like you're probably asking like, well, how am I even going to do that? So that really is what this guidance document is meant to help you with. And so bear with me, we're going to get into that in a little bit. But this is mostly talking about how might you be impacting the community within which the project or program change is affecting. Okay, third kind of main focus area is providing equitable mitigation. So again, this is looking at whether the mitigation proposed is adequately addressing those impacts, particularly for communities that might be environmental justice communities or they're overburdened or underserved communities, but then also looking at if your project isn't necessarily impacting one of those communities, could the mitigation associated with the project be used to help one of those communities in some other way? And that's where we'll start talking about the fourth focus area, which is considering public access. So with the updates to the law in 2024, and then again with this policy that the commission adopted, we have really started to try and specifically focus on improving and increasing public access in the critical area. So you're going to probably hear a lot more about that. And we are internally exploring a lot of kind of different and unique ways to help encourage that kind of focus or goal. So hopefully, there'll be more to come on that. But okay, going back to that first focus area, public engagement. I just want to reiterate that, again, this is going to be required for projects that come to the commission and program changes. So we currently have in the regulations for projects that come to the commission, there is a public notice requirement, and most of you are probably familiar with that. So you post a sign on the site, you publish in the local newspaper, and you ask for comments. And if you've done that, then you have pretty much met those public notice requirements. So we are trying to think through ways to make that process more targeted and more engaging for the communities that might be impacted by a proposal that's coming to the commission. So the commission is currently working to create a community outreach list. So this is not finalized yet, so we are not going to be asking you to do this until we have a list created for you. But the goal here is to create this. It'll likely be an email list so that when a project occurs within your jurisdiction or proposal, it could be a program change as well. When that occurs within your jurisdiction, there will be a component to the public outreach and engagement, the public notice, that includes, doing an email out to this community contact list for the contacts within your jurisdiction. This is also going to include potentially tribal contacts. We are currently coordinating with a couple different entities in Maryland, like specific tribes, but also the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, to kind of try and square away getting the right people on this list of contacts. So again, stay tuned on this. We're not going to ask you to do this until we have a list for you to use. If you have thoughts or ideas about who you think should be included on such a list, please reach out to me. I am likely going to be reaching out to some of you in the coming weeks as I work on finalizing this. So like our counterparts at DNR are also doing a lot of work in this area. So right now we're kind of riding their coattails a little bit as they work to create their outreach lists. But I definitely want to hear from you all as well if you have thoughts on this. So that is kind of the first new change that's coming. The next is potential mailed notice. So this is only going to be required under certain circumstances. Mostly if the proposal is within an environmental justice or overburdened underserved community. And we're looking at, this would only be required within a certain radius of the proposal. So this is not going to be 100% of the time, depending on the proposal that's coming to the commission. But there could be certain situations where mailing a specific notice to community members may be required. The other kind of part of this is when you are holding your any public meetings or engagement that you're already doing in terms of what's required at the local level for commission projects or programs that come to the commission. We are recommending accessibility features for those public meetings. So that could be just as simple as providing a virtual option for some of them if they're in person, but making a virtual option possible. Also, providing hearing or visual assistance for those if it's requested for the meeting. And again, I know that a lot of jurisdictions are already doing this kind of thing. This is a recommendation in the policy guidance, so this is not a requirement, but it is something that we want jurisdictions to kind of be thinking about. And then the last kind of part of this is that, like I said previously, with our current public notice requirements, we are just asking that you post the sign, publish the notice in the newspaper. If there are comments received, like sometimes we get that feedback from applicants that are coming to the commission. Sometimes we have to ask for it specifically, but what I think we're going to do now is ask that applicants provide a summary, not only of the comments they received, but also kind of how they met their public engagement requirements, like what public hearings were held, public meetings, anything like that. So kind of provide a summary of how that was done, and then also a summary of the comments and what the result of those comments was, like how was the comment responded to. And we are going to provide, again, like a template tracking spreadsheet for this. So, you can use that or not. If you have something you already use, that's also totally fine. And again, I do want to stress that, like, a lot of you may be sitting there thinking like, well, we already do this. We're doing this at the local level. We have these public hearings before a text amendment or before, a major project gets approved. That's great. That it is very possible that what you are already doing at the local level is going to be meeting some of these new requirements. So then the only change is going to be providing us with like a summary of what you are doing at the local level. Okay. If anyone has questions, please feel free to like raise your hand, jump in, and if somebody could kind of keep track of the chat for me, that would be great. Okay, so second focus area was measuring impacts. So we are basically going to be asking applicants to provide information on whether their proposal may impact an environmental justice community, an overburdened community, an underserved community. And you saw in Kate and Lisa's presentation a couple screenshots from MDE's EJ screen. So that will be one of the tools that we are asking you to use to identify those potential communities. There are also a couple other tools that we are going to have you use to look up, the location of your proposed project or program change if it's a growth allocation, and kind of identify potential impacts that the proposal may have. So I recognize that this is going to be kind of weird for some program changes like text amendments. But I did, part of this guidance document is, it's not advancing. Part of this guidance document does include an equity analysis worksheet that I have created for projects and growth allocations, because those are location specific. But then there is a separate spreadsheet or worksheet, sorry, for program changes. And so you'll see once the guidance is released that those are pretty different in how they walk you through gathering this kind of information because of that fact. So again, I know that this is like a lot of new stuff, and we're really trying to not make you feel overwhelmed by it, if at all possible, by providing these kind of guidance documents, these resources for you, the templates, the the worksheet to kind of walk you through specific questions and information gathering. So again, hopefully we're succeeding at that, but I welcome feedback from any and all of you. Okay, the third main focus area is equitable mitigation. So again, we're going to be looking at using MDE's EJ screen tool and a couple other tools that the state has available. Just for example, there's a tree canopy tool that was created as part of a legislative action a few years ago. The worksheet walks you through looking up your site using that tool also to identify whether it's potentially underserved in terms of tree canopy, which could be useful information when you're putting together a mitigation package for something. So again, the worksheet has several tools listed there. There's instructions on how to use them that are part of it. So you would be kind of using those tools to identify whether the site is located in any potentially underserved or overburdened communities. And then you're asked questions basically on how the mitigation might benefit an overburdened or underserved community or environmental justice community. Another kind of element to this that we are hoping to encourage is that we start exploring kind of more innovative mitigation opportunities and potentially out-of-kind mitigation proposals, which would include public access. And that is our kind of fourth focus area. So, we are specifically calling that out. So that is something that we are really hoping to start encouraging jurisdictions consider and state agencies consider when they are bringing proposals to the commission for approval. Again, the equity analysis worksheet is going to help walk you through kind of how to address this question of equitable mitigation. But then going back to public access, we we want applicants to be asking the question, is there a way to incorporate public access into the proposal? And then also considering public access as potential out-of-kind mitigation. I think Kate referenced our fee in lieu guidance that Jamili has been working on. There is a lot in there that, and I think did we present on that yet? We haven't presented on it yet. I think that's actually on the agenda for October.
We
Um,
presented last year on the family guidance.
So we gave kind of a preview of it. But that is full of hopefully useful information for you all. And it's geared towards helping you figure out how to spend fee and lieu money. But there is a lot in there related to kind of innovative mitigation opportunities. With the change to our law and the 2 new goals that were added related to resiliency and equity, I know that has resulted in all of this new information and these kind of new processes and additional things that we are asking of you. But I think on the flip side of that, it has also provided a lot of flexibility in how mitigation is met. So we really want jurisdictions to be thinking outside the box a little bit there. And that fee and lieu guidance document, while it is specifically kind of framed around helping you spend fee and lieu, I think there's definitely applicable ideas and information in there when it comes to, thinking about mitigation for individual proposals that are coming to the commission. So we just want that to be on everyone's mind, trying to plant some seeds here and kind of get everybody's wheels turning a little bit in that regard. Okay, so the equity analysis worksheet that is part of this guidance document, like I said, there are 2 versions. There is one that addresses projects and growth allocations because those are obviously more location specific. And then there's a separate one for program changes, which is it basically, there's less of looking up the site on the different overburdened, underserved tools, like are the tools that can tell you like if the site is overburdened, underserved. There's a lot less of that and more kind of thinking through potential impacts of the proposed change. So again, I understand that it's kind of a weird application to be making, but I don't think that means that there's absolutely nothing we can do for program changes. I think it may just take a little bit of reframing the way that we have considered them in the past. So that worksheet is meant to kind of walk an applicant through making those potential connections, and maybe there aren't any, and that's fine. The worksheet will show that. So again, we're trying to make this as least burdensome as possible for the applicant. I did want to say that the worksheet that is part of this guidance document, it will likely replace our existing growth allocation equity worksheet that we have. For those of you who have brought a growth allocation to the commission since I think it was October of 2024, after the law changed, the standards and factors for growth allocation that went into effect like that fall after the law update. So we created a worksheet to help applicants address the climate resiliency standard that was new and the equity factor. However, that is likely the equity worksheet portion of that is likely going to be replaced with this guidance document and these worksheets that are now attached. So don't worry, you're not going to have to do both. We are just kind of combining the 2 basically. So again, the worksheet's going to walk the applicant through using tools like EnviroScreen to kind of gather information. And then there are questions that are asked, you know, using that information that you gather, answer like, you know, certain questions related to those 4 focus areas that we just went over. Okay, so the guidance document is still in draft form. We are kind of finalizing that document as it internally, kind of as it's going through reviews, but we are hoping to have that finalized by next month. And then once it is out there, we will start using that, right? So when you bring a project or a program change to the commission, we're going to include that guidance and the associated worksheets as part of the submittal. This, like I said at the beginning, when the regs that Lisa and Kate talked about become finalized, we're likely going to kind of update this guidance document, or at least include, you know, a second part to it that addresses those types of project changes that are likely not going to be coming to the commission. Those types of projects that are likely not going to be coming to the commission, but are going to have to follow any new equity regulations. And also, you know, this policy that the commission passed in October, it is written into the policy that we do an evaluation and update every 2 years. So what that is likely going to entail is taking a look at how implementation is going and where we might be struggling with some things. And that document, that policy is going to be likely updated as a result of, you know, those 2-year reviews that we'll be doing. So again, like, feedback is welcome. And I know that this is a lot and potentially, you know, feels like a big change and could be overwhelming. We are really trying to limit that for you all. But please, like, provide, you know, any feedback you have once you, you know, maybe start using the guidance document and the worksheets attached to it. Like, please let us know if you think it's not working at all, if you think it could be tweaked, any suggestions. You know, we certainly welcome them. And then with that, I will end with a picture of my dogs and ask for questions.
Thank you, Charlotte. Any questions for Charlotte? Or continue discussion? I know it was a lot of information, so this will also bring out we'll do a summary. In the email that we send to you guys following this, we'll have a link again to this meeting, so you can always look back at the presentations, and then yeah, we'll have contact information if you have any additional questions that arise between between now and then. So yeah, let's see. I don't think yeah, 11:30. Okay. So we have about, I think this was the last thing on our agenda. So if there aren't any questions, we can close it off here. Unless, Charlotte, do you have any?
No, I would just say if, you know, if anything comes to you later, or, you know, you want to talk individually, please reach out. I'll put my email and number in the chat. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Charlotte. And everybody that provided their email address to today in the chat, That has our contact list has been updated to include your emails, and you should have received an email from me that has our most recent email that was sent out by Kate and Lisa the other week that included the updated draft regulations. So any problems with that, just again, throw your email in the chat, or you can reach out to us following the meeting. And yeah, there's Charlotte's email address if you have any questions about the new equity guidance. And yeah, with that, we are adjourned. And I can't remember when our next meeting is off the top of my head, but that will be in the email that we'll send out following this.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Michael has solidified a specific date for it, but it'll probably be sometime in October.
Excellent. All right, great. All right, so until October, have a wonderful rest of your summer, and thank you for coming.